Her name was Lilia Valutite. She was 9 years old. On the evening of July 28, 2022, she was spinning that hula hoop on the sidewalk outside her mother's shop in a quiet English town called Boston, a place so safe that her mom didn't think twice about leaving the door open while she worked inside. 45 seconds changed everything. And what came after, the investigation, the manhunt, the trial, would take the British legal system nearly 4 years to untangle. Because this case wasn't just about what happened on that sidewalk. It was about whether the man responsible even understood what he'd done. Lilia was born on February 2, 2013, at Boston Pilgrim Hospital. Her family was part of Boston's large and tight-knit Lithuanian community. If you're not familiar with this corner of England, Boston is a town in the county of Lincolnshire, about 100 miles north of London. Lilia was a bright kid, an ordinary kid, in the best possible way. She went to Boston Pioneers Academy and later to Carlton Road Primary School. She had a younger sister she was close to. The kind of closeness where the two of them played together constantly, inventing games, chasing each other, pretending. Her mother, Lena Savitske, ran a small embroidery shop on a narrow back street in the center of town called Fountain Lane. Lilia grew up around that shop. She knew every doorway, every shop sign, every crack in the pavement. When school was out, she'd come by and hang around while her mom worked, usually dragging her little sister along. That's exactly what she was doing on the evening of July 28, 2022. And I want you to picture this scene clearly, because everything that happens in this story flows out of it. It's a warm summer evening. The shop door is propped open. Inside, Lena is at her sewing machine. Outside on the sidewalk, Lilia has her hula hoop. She's 9 years old. She's spinning it. She's laughing. Her little sister has a toy baby stroller. They're maybe 20 feet from the shop's front door. They are, by any reasonable definition, as safe as two children can possibly be. They don't know it yet, but they are being watched. To understand what happened next, you have to understand the person it happened because of. Deividas Skibas, Lithuanian, like Lilia's family. 22 years old on that Thursday in July. Living about a 10-minute walk from the shop on Fountain Lane. Skibas was born in Lithuania on December 8, 1999. By all accounts, his childhood in Lithuania was unremarkable. But somewhere between 2018 and 2021, Skibas began to develop symptoms of schizophrenia. If you're not familiar with schizophrenia, it's one of the most severe psychiatric illnesses we know of. It typically emerges in late adolescence or early adulthood. It causes delusions, hallucinations, paranoia, and disorganized thinking. It can be managed with medication, but only if the patient stays on that medication consistently. And that, it turns out, is a critical detail in this case. Skibas first came to the United Kingdom in 2020, looking for work. He found a job picking fruit, one of those grueling, low-paid seasonal jobs that's filled almost entirely by migrant labor in rural England. But his time in Britain did not go well. In 2020, and I want you to really sit with this because it's going to matter later, Skibas attacked a woman with pepper spray. He was arrested, and when the police interviewed him, his behavior was deeply disturbing. He told officers he was Lucifer. He told them that NASA had implanted a microchip in his body. He said they were controlling his actions remotely. This was not someone performing. This was someone in the grip of a genuine psychotic break. He was sectioned under the UK's Mental Health Act, meaning he was involuntarily admitted to a psychiatric hospital. And while he was in that hospital, he attacked a nurse, unprovoked. When asked why, he said the nurse had been reading his mind. Eventually, he was released, deported back to Lithuania, and there, finally, he was put on antipsychotic medication. For a while, it worked. His condition stabilized. His family reported he seemed calmer, more himself. And then, on July 2, 2022, Deividas Skibas got on a plane and came back to the United Kingdom. I want to pause here, because this is one of those moments where you have to stop and ask, how did this happen? Here is a man with a documented history of violent psychotic episodes in Britain, a man who had been sectioned, a man who had attacked two separate people, including a nurse, and he was legally permitted to return to the country. No red flag, no flight monitoring, nothing. The prosecution would later say, with a kind of bureaucratic shrug, "It is not entirely clear why he came here, possibly for work." That's it. That's the explanation. He moved into a shared house on Thorold Street in Boston. He had a few roommates, but he mostly kept to himself. Within weeks, he got into a physical fight with one of them. He stopped taking his antipsychotic medication consistently, and, according to evidence, he had started using illicit substances. Without getting into specifics, these were the kinds of substances that experts say are essentially gasoline on a fire for someone with his condition. They can trigger full psychotic episodes even in people who are otherwise stable. For someone who was already unstable, already off his medication, already hearing voices, the effect is something doctors describe as catastrophic. So here's the picture. As of late July 2022, a 22-year-old man, diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia, not taking his medication, using substances that were making his symptoms dramatically worse, living in a town where no one was actively monitoring his mental state, a man whose own psychiatrist had already warned years earlier that without ongoing treatment, the risk of violence would go up. That was the man. And on July 26, 2022, a Tuesday, he walked into a shop in the center of Boston and he bought a kitchen knife, an ordinary kitchen tool, something you'd use to peel an apple. He took it home to the house on Thorold Street. Then, on the evening of July 28th, at exactly 5:08 p.m., he walked out of his front door. He had the knife tucked into the waistband of his trousers, and from that moment, for more than an hour, his every movement was captured by the network of security cameras that blanket almost every British town center. He walked down Wormgate. He turned onto Fountain Lane. He circled back. He walked past several people. He walked past other children. He didn't stop. He didn't attack. He kept moving. By 6:15 p.m., Skibas had reached Fountain Lane. Most of the shoppers had gone home. And there, on the sidewalk outside the embroidery shop, was Lilia, spinning her hula hoop. Her little sister a few feet away with the toy stroller. Skibas was walking down Fountain Lane from the Wormgate end. The CCTV shows him quickening his pace as he got closer, and Lilia saw him coming. Some instinct, something ancient and wordless that senses danger, made her step off the street and up onto the sidewalk, trying to get out of his way. It didn't matter. It only put her closer to him. He pulled the knife from his waistband. He didn't say a word. He didn't hesitate. He just kept walking, straight toward her. What happened next took less than a second. One motion, one contact. Lilia was on the ground. Then he ran. Her younger sister stood a few feet away, frozen, not understanding what she had just seen. A few passers-by turned their heads. Someone shouted. Inside the embroidery shop, Lena heard the commotion outside. She dropped what she was doing and ran to the door. And what she saw on that sidewalk is something no parent should ever have to see. An off-duty police officer had noticed Skibas just minutes earlier at the corner of Fountain Lane and Wormgate. Something about the way he was moving had caught the officer's attention. When the shouting started, he came running. He did what he could. Paramedics arrived within minutes. They rushed her to Boston Pilgrim Hospital, the same hospital where she had been born 9 years before. At 7:11 p.m. on July 28, 2022, less than an hour after she had been spinning a hula hoop on that same sidewalk, Lilia was gone. Lincolnshire police launched what they called a full-scale investigation within minutes. They had the off-duty officer's description, they had witnesses on Fountain Lane, and they had the most powerful weapon British police have in a town center investigation, CCTV. Almost every street in central Boston has a camera pointed at it. And within hours, detectives had pieced together the route of a young man in a gray Calvin Klein t-shirt, walking in those long, slow loops before and after the attack. But here's the thing. Skibas almost got away. In the 48 hours that followed, he did something that the prosecution would later describe as deeply, deeply important. He didn't hide in his room, paralyzed by what he'd done. He didn't call the police to confess. Instead, he started taking very deliberate steps to escape the country. He hid the knife behind a radiator in the house on Thorold Street. He changed his clothes. He shaved off his beard, a significant visible change in appearance, and he contacted multiple family members back in Lithuania, asking them to send him money. Money for what? Money for transport home. He was planning to flee. He never told them what he'd done, just that he needed to get back to Lithuania fast. And according to the judge's later remarks, he almost certainly would have succeeded, if not for one thing. Lincolnshire police went public with a CCTV image, asking the community for help identifying the suspect. And one of Skibas's own roommates from the house on Thorold Street looked at the photo, recognized him immediately, and called the police. On the afternoon of July 30th, 2022, 2 days after Lilia's death, officers arrived at the property on Thorold Street. They arrested a 22-year-old man in connection with the investigation. 2 other people at the address were also briefly arrested but quickly released with no charges. The focus narrowed fast. Inside the house, investigators found the weapon, the kitchen knife, still wedged behind a radiator. They found a gray t-shirt with bloodstains on it. Forensic analysis matched the DNA on that shirt to Lilia. The physical case was overwhelming, and then came his own words. In a police interview, he gave what amounted to a confession. His exact words, "I grabbed the knife and I stabbed her." On July 31st, 2022, he was formally charged with murder. On August 1st, he made his first appearance at Lincoln Crown Court. He didn't enter a plea. He was remanded into custody, and at this point, if this were a normal case, we'd be talking about a trial that wrapped up by Christmas. But this wasn't a normal case, because Skibas was about to do something in custody that would throw the entire prosecution into chaos and stretch this case out for years. Shortly after his arrest, Skibas was transferred to HM Prison Wakefield in West Yorkshire. Wakefield is one of the toughest prisons in the British system, with a population that includes some of the country's most notorious offenders. And here's the thing you should know about the British prison culture. Child killers are not protected. In August 2022, just weeks after his arrival, Skibas was attacked by other inmates. He was airlifted to a hospital in serious condition. He was patched up and, almost unbelievably, returned to his cell the next day. After that attack, Skibas's mental health, which had been deteriorating anyway, went into freefall. He started making increasingly bizarre statements. He told prison staff and later detectives that he had eaten a grain of rice that was actually a NASA microchip. He claimed that he had the power to resurrect Lilia if only the police would put him in touch with his controller at NASA. He said voices had told him to stab her. He said the voices had told him to pick the bigger of the 2 girls. Defense lawyers took these statements and began building a legal strategy around them. By early 2023, psychiatric experts were arguing that Skibas was too mentally ill to participate in his own trial. And this is where the case enters genuinely unusual legal territory. On April 17, 2023, a judge at Lincoln Crown Court ruled that Skibas was unfit to plead. In the British and American legal systems, this is a specific, narrow finding. It doesn't mean a defendant is innocent. It doesn't mean a defendant is guilty. It means that, right now, the person's mental state is so impaired that they cannot meaningfully participate in their own defense. They can't understand the charges. They can't instruct their lawyers. They can't follow the proceedings. When that happens in England, a normal criminal trial can't take place. But the court can still hold what's called a trial of the facts. It's a strange halfway proceeding. A jury is impaneled. Evidence is presented. But the jury is not asked whether the defendant is guilty or not guilty. They are asked a simpler, narrower question. Did this person physically do the act they are accused of doing? That's it. No ruling on intent. No ruling on responsibility. Just, did it happen? Skibas's trial of the facts began on July 10, 2023, at Lincoln Crown Court. It was presided over by Mrs. Justice McGowan. Skibas himself was not even present in the courtroom. The court decided his mental state made attendance impossible. The judge told the jury, "You will not be asked to say guilty or not guilty. He is seriously mentally ill and is not here." After 2 days of evidence, the jury took just 30 minutes to reach their finding. On July 11, 2023, they unanimously agreed. Skibas had stabbed and killed Lilia. The act was established. Justice McGowan issued what's called a Section 37 hospital order under the Mental Health Act. Skibas was transferred indefinitely to Rampton, a high-security psychiatric hospital in Nottinghamshire that houses some of Britain's most dangerous mentally ill offenders. But, and this is critical, there was no conviction. Legally, Skibas had not been found guilty of anything. The door was left open. If his mental state ever improved to the point that he could understand a trial, he could be brought back to court and tried properly for murder. For Lena and her family, this was a devastating half-answer. Their daughter's killer was off the streets, but he had never been convicted. He had never been held fully accountable. There was no real closure, just a hospital order in a remote psychiatric facility with no end date and no guarantee that justice, real justice, would ever actually arrive. It would take more than 2 more years before it finally did. At Rampton High Security Hospital, Skibas was given what, by most accounts, was exactly the kind of treatment he should have been receiving for years. Consistent antipsychotic medication, structured days, psychiatric monitoring around the clock, and slowly, over the course of about 2 years, his condition began to stabilize. By the spring of 2025, psychiatrists who examined Skibas came to a new conclusion. His schizophrenia hadn't gone away. It never does. But with treatment, his symptoms were controlled enough that he could now understand court proceedings, recognize the charges against him, and communicate meaningfully with lawyers. He was, the experts said, fit to plead. On October 3, 2025, Skibas appeared via video link at Lincoln Crown Court. He was asked to enter a plea to the charge of murder, and this is where his defense team played their strongest remaining card. Skibas pleaded not guilty to murder, but he pleaded guilty to manslaughter by reason of diminished responsibility. If you've never encountered that phrase before, let me break it down. It's a legal defense specific to English and Welsh law. The defendant is essentially saying, "Yes, I killed this person, but at the time I did it, my mental capacity was so substantially impaired by a recognized medical condition that I shouldn't be convicted of the full crime of murder. I should be convicted of the lesser crime of manslaughter." In practical terms, it's the difference between a mandatory life sentence and something much shorter. Sometimes even something that allows a defendant to eventually be discharged from hospital and released into the community. The defense's theory was straightforward. Skibas had paranoid schizophrenia. He was hearing voices. He believed NASA was controlling him with a microchip. He was in the grip of a genuine psychotic delusion at the moment of the attack. Under those conditions, could he really be said to have intended murder in the legal sense? The Crown Prosecution Service had a choice to make. They could accept the plea, closing the case, avoiding a risky trial, but downgrading Lilia's killing to manslaughter. Or they could reject it and push for a full murder conviction in front of a jury. On December 5, 2025, the CPS announced their decision. They would not accept the manslaughter plea. This was going to trial, a real one. After 3.5 years, Skibas's murder trial opened on January 27, 2026, at Lincoln Crown Court. The prosecution was again led by Christopher Donnellan, the same senior barrister who had handled the trial of facts back in 2023. 3 doctors, the jury was reminded, had all agreed Skibas was genuinely mentally ill on the day of the killing. But the prosecution had a counter. They called their own psychiatric evidence, including testimony that when Skibas was examined shortly after his arrest, at least one psychiatrist found no signs of active psychosis. And more importantly, Donnellan kept returning again and again to the behavior. Not the words, the behavior. Think about it, he told the jury. A man in the grip of uncontrollable psychosis does not buy a knife 2 days in advance. He does not walk past other potential victims because the moment isn't right. He does not carry his weapon concealed in his waistband. He does not, after the crime, hide the weapon behind a radiator. He does not shave off his beard. He does not call his family and ask for money to get out of the country. All of those actions, Donnellan argued, require one thing: an awareness that what you have done is wrong, and a desire to avoid being caught for it. The jury retired to deliberate. This was the moment the entire case had been building toward for 3.5 years. They came back in less than a day. On February 5, 2026, the verdict came. 11-1. Skibas was found guilty. The jury had concluded that whatever was happening inside Skibas's head on July 28, 2022, he still knew what he was doing was wrong, and he did it anyway. 20 days later, on February 25, 2026, Skibas was brought back into court for sentencing. Or rather, he appeared on a screen. He was still detained at Rampton High Security Hospital, and the court allowed him to participate by video link. Skibas was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 25 years before being eligible for parole. On the screen, he didn't move. He just stared ahead as the words were read out. Lilia was 9 years old. She loved Harry Potter. She loved her little sister. She loved spinning a hula hoop on the sidewalk outside her mom's shop on a warm Thursday evening in July. She deserved every day of the life that was taken from her. She deserved to grow up. She deserved to become a teenager and a young woman and whatever else she wanted to be. She deserved to sit at her mother's table at Christmas and argue with her sister and fall in love and live. And instead she is buried in a cemetery in Boston, Lincolnshire, and the town she grew up in will never be quite the same. If there's anything to take from this, anything at all, maybe it's just this: hold the people you love a little tighter tonight. Don't take the ordinary for granted. Don't assume tomorrow is a guarantee. Because for Lena, on the evening of July 28, 2022, all of the ordinary things, the open shop door, the sound of her daughters laughing on the sidewalk, the warm summer air, were ordinary right up until the moment they weren't. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.